every time it feels like things are about to go wrong, South Africans have a way of making sure that they don't let it go wrong.
Hy is maar 37 jaar oud en hy is die DA se nuwe voorsitter van die federale raad. Hy dien ook as 'n adjunkminister van finansies. Sy naam is Ashor Sarupen. Welkom Ashor, is baie lekker om jou hier te hê.
Thank you for having me on, Tanya.
It's only been a few weeks, nog net 'n paar weke vandat jy verkies is as die DA se voorsitter van die federale raad. 2 weke terug was hierdie Helen Zille se werk. En ek het met politieke ontleeders gepraat en hulle sê vir my dat hierdie een van die moeilikste posisies in die DA is. Het voel vir my amper hulle gee vir jou al die moeilike werk in die DA, want jy is ook adjunkminister van finansies. So sê vir my, wat behels hierdie nuwe posisie van jou as 'n voorsitter van die DA se federale raad? En jy kan dalk ook vir ons net sê, wat is dit presies wat die federale raad van die DA doen?
Yeah, so let's start with what the Federal Council, the federale raad, doen. It is what we call the engine room of the party. It's where all the key decisions are made. It is the highest decision-making body of the party between our big congresses, as you saw the weekend before last. And basically, it is responsible for all the decisions. I also chair the federal executive as a consequence of being the chair of the council, which means all the coalitions, the strategy. In our constitution, the chair of the federal council is responsible for operations, strategy. I'm the legal persona of the party, so nobody can litigate. All the court cases are the DA taken in my name against the sort of the NHI and expropriation and those sorts of things. So that is a big job. But then, of course, it effectively have control over the day-to-day management of the party as well. And those things are very, very big jobs. As you said, following in from Helen, who did it very, very well. I was fortunate enough to have been her deputy for 6 years. And so I got to learn a lot in that time. So I suppose it's a natural next step if you spend that much time as the deputy to then get elected to the main job.
Voordat ek jou gaan vra in watse toestand jy hierdie party geërf het, wil ek amper sê, is jy nog steeds van plan om aan te bly as adjunkminister van finansies? Ek bedoel, dis ook 'n baie groot werk. As ons weer dink aan die begroting wat volgende jaar, jy is seker nou alweer besig met dit. So, dink jy gaan albei kan doen?
Yeah, look, thankfully I again watched Helen for many years. She was a mayor in the coalition and the leader of the DA. She was the premier and the leader. And so I watched people in politics have 2 jobs. And if the DA is serious about being a party of national government and a party that can exercise public power, it has to be able to have leaders who can do both. If you want to be a political party that's only ever going to be a protest party and not be in government, then of course your leaders are not going to be in government. But then you're never going to show voters that you can actually deliver in government. So there are 2 very big jobs, as you say. I have learned a lot at the treasury, and so I think I've learned how to balance the jobs out. I also when I suggested I would consider my options, I got phone calls from major banks, global financial institutions, and so I said, you can't leave the treasury. So so the panic on that side also made me think, okay, let's see how we can balance the diary. Thankfully, I've got a good staff team at the treasury. I've got a very good staff team at the DA. And so provided that I can stay on top of things, keep reading my documents, have enough time for all of that, I should be able to do both.
Jy en Jordan Lewis, hy is nommer 1 van die party, jy is nommer 2, soos wat mens daarna verwys. Julle al 2 is van baie jonk af al. Jy weet, is julle lede van die DA, julle is so half deur die ranks gekom. Ken julle mekaar al baie lank? Het julle al van tevore saam gewerk of gaan hierdie nou regtig die eerste keer wees wanneer julle saamwerk? En dit is as nommer 1 en nommer 2.
So, I've known Jordan for a long time. Have we worked together day to day like this? Not quite like this. I've known Jordan in 2007 as a student at Wits, and he had just the previous year won the DA's first SRC seats at UCT. He had started the UCT DA Students Organization branch, and I got involved in the Wits one, and he came to help us out. So I've known Jordan, back then we were didn't have anything but being students really. And so I've known him and we worked together on all sorts of things over the years. Never on a day-to-day basis, but we've always been good friends. And so I think the relationship is going to work very well. And there are things he likes doing that I don't like doing. There are things I like doing that he doesn't like doing. And so I think that does help because we can complement each other very well.
Dink jy julle gaan, ek wil amper sê so half 'n bietjie van 'n nuwe energie, 'n nuwe dinamika na die party toe bring?
I think we do bring a new energy and a new dynamic. It's a generational shift for the DA. The last time we had this big a change was when Tony Leon was elected at the age of 37 as well, back in the 90s, to be the leader of the Democratic Party. And if you look at the DA's leadership, let's take the top four people effectively, which is Jordan Hill-Lewis, Salim Simanga, myself, and Mark Burke as the federal finance chair. None of us served in any kind of office in the party or in public office when Tony Leon was the leader of the party. So it's a complete generational shift for the DA. And it shows that a party can renew itself, bring in new ideas. And I think we represent a more modern South Africa as well. One that is, more technocratic, more focused on delivery and so on. And I think that that's what we will bring as well. So I think I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited. But I think definitely there's been an injection of energy. And I think you see it in the public reaction and the media reaction that people are quite excited about this new team that's taking the DA forward.
Nie almal weet dit, dink ek het nie geweet het wat jy my daarop gewys het. Jy is die enigste een van hierdie nuwe leierskap wat al in die party se nasionale leierskap was. Almal is nuut.
Yes.
En gaan jy hulle maar 'n bietjie touwys maak.
Well, I mean, it's an onboarding process because obviously Helen was elected back into the leadership in 2019 in October. Everyone remembers that. And I ran her campaign to come back, and then I was appointed chief of staff and then elected her deputy a year later. So in that time, from 2019 to now, I've been there, but a lot of the folk, at least on our top four, have not been in the leadership before. And Sibiwe Kharube was not there before. Sonny Malatsi was for the last 3 years, and JP Smith and Thomas Walters. But the rest of the folk, of the 10 people we elected at that Congress, only 4 of us have been there, and I was the most senior of those. So it is an onboarding process. There's ways decisions are taken, why we do things the way we do. And of course, not everything is correct, so things have to change. And that's where it's good to have lots of new people, because they add new eyes to things and don't do things because they've always been done that way. So yes, it's an onboarding process at the moment. But I think at least from this first sort of 2 weeks, it's been a very good onboarding process.
Het julle al nou as die nuwe leierskap van die DA vergader? Was daar al vergaderings en ek wil amper sê is daar 'n bietjie van 'n plan, 'n game plan?
Yes, so we've had lots of meetings in the last while. I convened the federal executive already last week. We're going to start the National Management Committee from next week, I think, or the week after. We'll meet every week. So the new leadership will be meeting regularly. We have a campaign team meeting once a week as well, where I brought all of the newly elected leadership on board to see how we run the election campaigns. And the strategy, we've had a good discussion on what the strategy is and how we're going to pivot the strategy going to November in line with the new leadership. And we're working on some of the tweaks already to get that, land the new leadership, land them in the public domain, the key issues that we're going to focus on. So yes, we've had these discussions already.
In watter toestand het julle die DA, ek wil amper sê geërf? Loop hierdie blou masjien so glad soos wat jy sou wil hê? Hoe lyk die party nou na hierdie groot kongres?
I think the party is much stronger after this Congress. I think it was a big energizing moment internally for the EA. I think it was also an opportunity to refocus. I think every time we get new leadership, we get new direction, and we get an opportunity to ask ourselves what it is we want for South Africa. And I think Jordan laid it out best in his speech when he, towards the end, spoke very strongly about crime and the rule of law. And in light of what we've seen with the Madlanga Commission and so on, the truth is rule of law in South Africa is hanging by a thread. And I think one of the first things that for the DA now with this new space and coming out of Congress is a renewed focus on that and saying, how are we as a party? We are the party of the rule of law, and everyone knows that. Nobody thinks that we're not. We're not a lawless party that throws chairs at our congresses and so on. But we have now got to give the public a compelling offer, not just on the service delivery, which we do well, on taking on the ANC, which we do very well, and so on, but actually saying, what is the critical thing? I think many South Africans feel unsafe in their day-to-day life. They see criminals getting off scot-free and all sorts of things. The police arrest people and nothing happens. I think Jordan gave a very strong, compelling vision on the rule of law and safety, along with the things the DA is always strong at, delivery, being a party for all and so on. But putting the focus on that, I think, also has given the party now some direction.
Jordan het in haar toespraak, sy eerste toespraak as die federale leier, gesê die groot doel is nou om die grootste party in die land te word. Dink jy dit kan gedoen word? En ek wil amper sê, in julle leeftyd, in die tyd wat julle in die leierskap is, dink jy dit kan dan al gebeur?
Yeah, so if you look at what happened with SRF polling, and the SRF poll was the most accurate public poll going into the 2024 election, and so on last year, after the VAT fight, we almost level pegged with the ANC in polling. And all through last year, with the various sort of fights that we had in the GNU, you started seeing voters actually quite like what they see. They see a DA that can deliver, a DA that can hold its own, a DA that can fight very strongly, and refuses to be swallowed up in the government. And they like that. But it's also had the effect of detoxifying the DA's brand with historic ANC voters. That's one of the things that GNU has given us. And so people who would otherwise not look at us say, okay, well, maybe I should look at, they can't be as bad as they say they are because they're in government together. And so it's been, in that sense, it's been good for us. So can we become the largest party by 2029 or in the near future? I think it is doable. It's going to require a lot of work, but that vision can be translated into reality, not because it's just because we've had a Congress, but because for the last 6 years we've been building up a ground war to try to match the ANC. And I think if you saw my campaign report on the floor of Congress, we were able to, on election day in 2024, knock on 900,000 doors alone, sort of building that activist base, that membership base, energizing activists, giving them direction. We've already registered 70,000 voters for the DA voters for the 2026 local government elections. And it's those sorts of things. So it's leadership energy, picking the right issues, picking the right fights, being credible where we govern, delivering, and then building up the ground machine, which I've been working very hard at for the last 6 years. And those things together, I think, can deliver a very good election result in future.
Wat gaan julle grootste uitdaging wees?
Look, our biggest challenge, firstly, is the fact that for many voters, because of the way the public purse has been abused, they conflate the ANC with the government. So the government does something, they believe that the ANC has done something. And that separation of party and state line, I think, with government advertisers, people believe it's the ANC advertising and so on. So I think that's the first biggest challenge to overcome, is the government will spend a lot of money in communications, and even though we are in the GNU, people still perceive it on the other end as the ANC. So it's overcoming that scale of communications. I think the second biggest challenge is fragmentation in politics. That proportional representation always leads to fragmentation, and then you've got all these 1- and 2-seat parties that hijack your political system and cause chaos. The effect of that is that many people feel like that, what's the point in voting? If, I can vote for the DA or I can vote for whomever, but then some tiny party that nobody voted for, like you saw Al-Jamar in Johannesburg, give us, 2 mayors in 3 months or something, and this party got 12,000 votes in a city of 5 million people, and literally 12,000 votes, and leverage that position of 12,000 votes to get the mayorship, and ran Johannesburg terribly. So I think that's the second challenge to overcome, is then the apathy of what's the point of voting, the coalitions will never work, and so on. And the coalitions can work. It's going to take a while for us to settle. This is new. We've had a one-party dominant state for a while. But that, I think, are our two biggest challenges.
Ons het nou al genoem dat jy 'n adjunkminister van finansies is. Jy is in wese die DA se oë en ore in die finansies portefeulje. Hoe belangrik is daardie insig? Ek wil sê, daar agter die geslote deure, hoe belangrik is dit dat jy nou daar is en vir jou party kan sê wat aan die gang kom en dat jy een van die is vir die besluite neem?
Yeah. So it's important that we're there, because if you look at what the DA in opposition prior to the GNU were saying about the macro economy and getting our economy moving, said government debt is too high and is constantly climbing and it's getting out of control. And from 2007 to 2024, government debt ballooned from 27% of GDP to 77%. So we went from sort of 1.5 trillion rand in debt to 6 trillion rands in debt, or 6.5 trillion rands in debt. So there's huge government borrowing, expenditure problems. Most government expenditure was focused on consumption, not investment, and that's why our infrastructure looks the way it does, and so on. Inflation was running well above other emerging markets. So it was important that we landed and, as part of the negotiations, got ourselves into the treasury, because we knew that the government could not continue with profligate spending, could not continue living beyond its means, could not continue spending and consumption and not investment. And if you look in these 18 months, the finance minister and I, there are lots of things we disagree on, but the things we agreed on were some of these fundamentals, and we've been able to move on these fundamentals very quickly. So inflation is low. It's running at last month 3.1%. It's been bedded down at 3% now. If you look at government debt, we've peaked government debt. And we are one of 6 countries in the world running a primary budget surplus. We're the only G20 country, if we're still in the G20, running a primary budget surplus, and so on, to begin to stabilize our debt. And we've become more credible in the markets. Before the GNU, government debt was, the interest rate in that, the bond yields was as high as 11%. And we got it before the war in Iran now to as low as 7.7%. So that compression of the yields meant that government pays less to borrow money as well, and we're borrowing less. And so the fiscal picture looks much better, and the country becomes more compelling for investment. And that's why it's really important that a DA person is in the treasury.
Wat is jou boodskap aan Suid-Afrikaners oor hoe gaan dit met Suid-Afrika? Is daar hoop?
So I think South Africans default to hopelessness all the time. Even when things are not so bad, we're just like, because we've got so many problems. We've got a crime problem. We have got a growth problem. We have got, we've got a poverty problem. Everywhere you look, there's problems. But we are a resilient country filled with resilient people. And every time it feels like things are about to go wrong, South Africans have a way of making sure that they don't let it go wrong. And I think that it's the resilience of the people of South Africa that should give us hope. I mean, forget the politics. It's actually the South Africans themselves. And that's why I wake up every day and do this, is because I think that most South Africans are decent, well-meaning people who want to get along, who want to live together, and who just want their country to work. And I'm doing my best to make it work.
En dan my laaste vraag aan jou. Jy moet asseblief nie terughou nie. Hoe moeilik is dit om met die ANC saam te werk agter geslote deure?
It's not easy. It is, and it's always ever going to be difficult. The truth is, the DA and the ANC have been at each other's throats since the early 90s, because we have fundamental disagreements. We're never going to agree on race-based policy. We're never going to agree on BEE. We're never going to agree on labor legislation. We're never going to agree on a whole host of things, on the capital controls and so on. So the things that we are going to disagree on, these are fundamental differences between our parties, and we're going to fight. And there are some people who say that we must get along and no, but you're in the government together, you must figure out. And I say, no, we'll fight our ground, and we will stand our ground on things we disagree with. And we will fight very hard on those things because we represent the interests of our voters. But for the things we agree on, like concessioning out the port and freight rail network to the private sector, getting a competitive energy market, dealing with government debt, and so where we find each other, then we want to work very quickly and put maximum pressure on them so that these things move more quickly. And you have seen some movement. That's why this year's budget had such a positive effect, because it showed the best ideas of both parties coming together. And so where we can make things work, we must work very hard. But where we can't make things work, we must fight very hard. And I think, and that's basically what it's like behind the scenes. And I think that will continue.
Dit was Ashor Sarupen, die DA se nuwe voorsitter van die federale raad en adjunkminister van finansies. Baie dankie Ashor. Dit was so lekker om jou hier te hê en kom kuier weer.
Of course I will.